Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Lorber. I'm the director of Rain Taxi, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our 20th Twin Cities Book Festival. With me on screen now is Alan, our ASL interpreter, and our featured guest. We'll get to her in a moment. I do want to thank Alan for being here and helping to make this session even more accessible. I want to also thank our friends at the University of Minnesota Libraries for supporting our ASL interpreted events. As many of you know, we normally do our Twin Cities Book Festival at the Minnesota State Fairgrounds in two big buildings, and we cram thousands of people in there to enjoy it. Obviously, we're doing it a little bit differently this year, but we're having no less fun, and we hope that you will poke around our festival website and enjoy all the good things there, such as author sessions like this one, pre-recorded sessions like in our Minnesota mashup and our new chapbook launch, and the great exhibitors we have. Tonight, I'm really thrilled to introduce this particular guest because we are welcoming back to our festival after a long hiatus, the Minnesota treasure that is Kate DiCamillo. As you know, Kate is the author of so many books, and if you're like me, you've lost count of how many times you've given one of those books to a child in your life. But while her output is prolific, her writing life has also involved a great deal of other things, like community outreach. She's been the National Ambassador for Young People's Literature, appointed by the Library of Congress. And of course, she's won many awards for her work, including the Newbery Medal twice, making her one of only 6 authors to achieve that distinction. I think readers gravitate to Kate's work because it shows how the world, with all its challenges, is still filled with hope and opportunity. Even the title of her latest book, Stella Endicott and the Anything is Possible poem, radiates that notion. The only problem with booking an author like Kate DiCamillo is figuring out who might be really great at talking with her. We hope to be joined soon by the person who exactly fits that notion, Jennifer M. Brown. Jennifer is a senior editor at Shelf Awareness, an e-newsletter that all of us in the book trade read religiously. She's also been the director of the Center for Children's Literature, as well as a children's librarian and a book publisher. So I know we'll be putting our Minnesota treasure in good hands if we can get her on screen. Stay tuned. For now, I want to remind all our viewers that you can ask questions at the bottom and buy books from our friends at Red Balloon at the links below. You can also make a donation if you choose. Rain Taxi puts on this free book festival every year. We're delighted to do it. We can only do it if we get support. So if you do feel moved by this session or anything else on offer in our festival, feel free to send a little love our way. And now it's really my great pleasure to welcome to the screen Kate DiCamillo. Kate will say a few words, and then I will chime in with a few questions while we see if we can get Jenny up here on screen as well. Welcome, Kate.
Eric, thank you. And thank you everybody for being here. I was thinking, Eric, as you were talking, that I did a virtual school visit a couple of days ago, and the kids asked a question that I get asked quite a bit, which is, what would you be doing if you weren't a writer? What would your job be? And it is a question that stumps me every time, because I feel like I am so lucky in that I've found what I'm supposed to do and that I get to do it. And I can't think of anything else that I want to do except for this. And then all of that said, that leads me to talk about being an introvert. Are you listening to me, Eric?
I
And I
am.
am such an introvert. And so I have missed so much interacting with my readers. And to me, that is, I always have embraced the writing part of me, but on the other hand, I've always been shy. And I said to you when we were in the green room beforehand that if I was doing this on stage, I would be sitting with my head between my knees because I'm so nervous going out there. But it's also made me realize how much I love to interact with people. So that then leads to you telling me some of those questions that are out there while we wait and see if we can make Jenny Brown's technology work. And if not, to all of you, I know that so many readers ask so many good questions that we will be able to fill the time, and it will be very sad for Jenny Brown, but Eric and I will be happy to.
We will.
Yeah.
We will forge ahead. And I think that's something we're all learning to do in so many different ways during this sadly unique experience of this year. I'm glad you really leapt right into that and talked, as I did, about missing people. Even missing strangers.
Right, and missing, this school that I did was an American school at The Hague, and so they were actually, it was a bunch of kids together in a room, and when they appeared in front of me, it made me tear up because it'd been so long since I'd seen it, and it was just, so it's just missing gatherings of people, which is what makes, I feel so lucky that we get to do this, because even though I can't see everybody's face, I'll get to hear their voice through the questions. So you want to toss one my way, Eric? Because you can look
Absolutely.
at, I know I can look at that.
No, I can do it.
Okay,
I'll be happy to do it.
Okay.
And actually, I've already done that, and I was getting to one that I thought was great and really connected to this, which is that, do you think you'll write something about this pandemic experience? Do you think it'll come into your writing in some way?
It's funny because the question that I've been asked most often during this time is, are you able to write at all? And I am always able to answer that question with a small amount of chagrin, because I have been able to write. And so many of my friends who are writers have said that they can't concentrate to write. And I have found that the writing has been a lifeline. And part of how I got into the saddle of doing it every day during this time was that I did some writing tips on my Facebook page for kids. This is right when everything, came to a halt. And I very much encouraged them to show up every day. And so then I felt morally bound to show up myself every day and write. And so I just kind of got into the rhythm of it. And I travel so much, and that's what, if I'm not traveling, then I'm writing. That was how my life used to go. And now I'm just writing all the time. So back to the question at hand, will the pandemic show up in a story? I don't think so, but I can see already that there are subcurrents in the stories that I'm working on of this time. And I think that I will, whether they will be visible to the reader, but I can feel the imprint of this time on the stories that I'm telling.
Oh, well, that'll be fascinating to see how that plays out. We'll all be looking for it, I'm sure, in so many different ways. Another thing that's come up, I think, certainly during our festival and in this in this new format in which we're all seeing everybody in their homes and their own personal spaces, is that occasionally we've been seeing animals wander into the frames and so forth. It's been great. And in fact, a lot of authors are nervous about that. We're like, let them in. We'd love to see them. It's part of
my
the whole
dog
thing.
has been taken elsewhere. Yeah.
Well, there we go. That was my question, because a reader out there wanted to know that since you write so often about pets, do you have pets of your own, and what's that like?
I do. I have a dog named Ramona, and this is like a very Twin Cities Book Festival pointed story here. And then I have learned in doing all these things that she doesn't like it if I'm sitting here talking to a screen. So it's like, and I did a sound check and everything with you guys on, I think it was Thursday. And so I gave her a greenie, chew thing to shut her up so that I could do the tech check. And so then I got on there and everything. And then she was in the middle of the bone and she heard something that she thought required her attention. And she leapt up onto the couch while barking and aspirated part of the bone. So I'm like, I'll be right back. And then I shoved my hand down the dog's throat and pushed the greenie all the way down. So that's why Ramona's not here. Jenny Brown.
But Jenny Brown is.
I'm on. You're on.
This is how the sausage gets made. Yeah.
Right, here we are. Jenny Brown. Are you ready?
Deep breath. I'm so sorry.
That's right. Well, welcome.
We're glad you're here.
We are indeed.
Yeah.
Jenny, I'm going to leave you guys. I've been asking Kate a few fantastic questions from the audience chat. We maybe have given the kids in the audience a chance to look up the word aspirated, too. That was nicely done, Kate. And so I think that's the perfect note for me to bow out on and to hand it over to Jenny. Thank you both again.
Thank you, Eric.
Delighted you're here, and enjoy.
Thank you.
Bye. Great to be here. I still can't believe it's been 20 years since you published Because of Winn-Dixie.
And are you going to tell the story about how you and I met?
Well, are you going to ask me questions or am I going to ask you questions?
This is a long-standing problem between me and everybody who interviews me. I end up interviewing them. So go ahead. You're in charge.
Okay. What I learned when you published Because of Winn-Dixie is that you were writing 2 pages a day. Do you still do that?
I do. And Eric and I were just talking about that when everything went into lockdown. And I did those writing tips on Facebook, which you actually looked at. And I was encouraging everybody to write. And how because I was encouraging them, I felt morally compelled to do it myself. And I do typically, pandemic or no, if I'm home, I'm usually writing 2 pages a day. And that is, I worked with somebody a long time ago who used to say to me, do you think Dickens wrote just 2 pages a day? And I would like to say to all the doubters out there, 2 pages a day is a novel. If you show up, it's a novel in a year's time if you show up every day. So.
And Dickens, of course, was under a certain amount of pressure because he would read his serial each week, right? And
right.
Store.
Right.
But you don't have to do. You can wait, and you do some editing too, don't you? After you write.
I am nothing but editing, Jenny Brown. And University of Minnesota has the Curlin collection, and you and I both know about that, but there might be other people that don't, where you can go in and look for children's writers and illustrators, and you can see all of my rough drafts and just what is that? Oh no.
Is an early draft of Because of Winn-Dixie, which I took from Lisa Von Drasek's office at Bank Street. So that is what people can see in the flesh when they go to the Curlin.
Yeah, and let's say what it is. It's terrible. It's you would, I sat next to somebody once at a luncheon who said that she had gone in and looked at the rough drafts of Winn-Dixie and thought that they were so terrible, and then thought, if this is where you're allowed to start, then I could write a novel. And that's why my stuff is at the Curlin, because she did go and write a novel. She was getting ready to publish a novel when I talked to her. And so it's just like, that's what it's there for. It's very embarrassing, but it also shows you that it's work, and that if you want to do something, you can work your way through it.
And Kate, I think we have shared the prompt to your Facebook posts. I think you did 12 altogether, and we have a link to that in the chat so that people can go and look at that and do that with their children or their students or their library patrons. It's a wonderful gift. And Kate, you were in conversation with Jason Reynolds about being a national ambassador for young people's literature, and you talked about some prompts that he did as well.
Oh, his prompts are amazing. I mean, they are amazing. And it's funny because I did that conversation with him, and he talked about his writing prompts and some of the stories that have happened from them. And then I put a thing up on Facebook because they're just amazing writing prompts. And I've heard from kids who, I mean, they open doors, those writing prompts. And so is there going to be a link to that?
We did provide a link to that.
Okay, as well. Great. Okay, they're just wonderful.
They're really amazing. And I'm going to tell a story that might embarrass you slightly, Kate, but you talked about in your youth wearing a black turtleneck and calling yourself a writer.
Yeah.
And it was an Ann Tyler book that convinced you actually could write.
It was an Ann Tyler book that convinced me that I could write, but convinced me of this, Jennifer Brown, that it was the thing that I needed and wanted to do. I thought, I want to make somebody feel the way those words just made me feel. And it was a passage in The Accidental Tourist. And I'm not in my office right now, but I would run and get it, but that's okay. I know you've got a lot of questions you have to make your way through, Jennifer Brown. So I'll just stay right here.
And then, Kate, another favorite story you told was when you were working at the Bookman, which had been right there in Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm.
And you took a book that you particularly admired and you typed it out, right? What book was that?
It was The Watsons Go to Birmingham, 1963, Christopher Paul Curtis. And that is a book that changed my life because I read it. And it had been published. It was the first middle grade novel that I'd read since I was a kid myself. And talking about Ann Tyler, it's a nice segue, Jennifer Brown. You're doing your job very well, because I had much the same response. I thought, I want to write something that makes somebody feel the way this book, The Watsons Go to Birmingham, makes me feel. And so I had, up to that point, I'd been writing short stories and sending them to literary journals. So I didn't know, it's like, how long would a children's book be? And how long would a chapter be? And how long would it be in manuscript? So I took the book home and typed up a chapter and kind of figured out, how long it should be based on Christopher Paul Curtis's beautiful work.
And you have talked a lot about the importance of rereading. Can you say a little more about that? I'm thinking especially of recently you did a post on Facebook of a picture of a spider web. And you talked about what you brought to that spider web because of rereading Charlotte's Web. Can you talk about that? Rereading has been on my mind so much as we're all in this current situation, right? Because there are certain books that I reread with a great deal of regularity, but for the most part, I don't go back and reread. And so all of a sudden, when everything went into lockdown, I found that what I wanted were these books that I hadn't read in a long time, and I went back and
and reread them. And in the course of that, I found something that I already knew because of being a poetry reader, that every time you read something, it's like you can't step into the same river twice. I'm different. So what I bring to the story is different, which goes to that wonderful notion that I've always had, that no story, that what I do isn't complete. I can write the book, but it's not a book. And I say this to kids until you're reading it. And then it's you and me, even though I'm nowhere, you might not know me. I'm 1,000 miles away, but you and I are in the story together. It is a communal undertaking. And that's what rereading has also made me realize, how much it's like what you take from it is where you are in your own personal journey. So.
Kate,
are my answers too long?
No, they're wonderful.
Okay.
Right, audience? You So, Kate, when I got to hear you once speaking at one of Lucy Calkins' teacher reunions at Teachers College at Columbia University, you talked about how The Tiger Rising is your book for writers. Can you say more about that?
Well, I didn't know that. What I know about Tiger Rising is that I always consider it my shy child. It's sandwiched in between two baton twirling overachievers, as it were. There's Because of Winn-Dixie and Tale of Despero. And Tiger Rising is just a much more quiet book. It's a darker book. And so it just has not, when a kid or an adult comes through the line with Tiger Rising and says, this is my favorite of all of your books, I don't know when I picked up onto this notion, but like, then I will say, are you a writer? And 99.9% of the time, they are a writer. But can I say something else about Lucy Calkins and Tiger Rising? And the astonishing thing to me also about Tiger Rising is not just how it you can pick out writers, but also what teachers have done with Tiger Rising in the classroom, and what I hear from teachers about how kids will talk about their own suitcases that they keep locked up, and that book has. And so this, if I could just have a moment to give a huge shout out to all the teachers that help kids see the world through story. And that story is what makes me think of it. But just in general, let me get up on my soapbox and say, now more than ever, that act of reading aloud is a life changer. And I know that so many of you teachers, like I talk to you when you come through a signing line, and you know that it is the most important thing too. And it matters even more now, even if you're doing it on technology. So thank you for doing it. It literally saves lives. Okay, I'm off my soapbox. Yeah.
That was a nice soapbox. You have a wonderful sense of humor, Kate. In fact, I would say that you are situationally funny.
I'll let you tell that story.
You find the humor in many situations. But you also respect how much children must handle in their lives and how often they must face their fears. And in fact, you know the story. My nephew Tiger, when his then 2-year-old sister had to undergo heart surgery for a hole in her heart, the book that he wanted to reread was The Tale of Despero. And in your Newbery acceptance speech for Despero, you described the importance of books that acknowledge children's fears and their ability to overcome them. Can you just talk a little bit about some of the things you mentioned in your speech? Just that.
It's funny because I'm thinking now less about my Newbery speech and more about, this is a speech that I gave at Teachers College, about my best friend that I grew up with, who read Charlotte's Web over and over, Tracy Bailey, from beginning to end. And she would finish the book and then she would start over again. I was a kid who did not read Charlotte's Web because I read Black Beauty. And from that point on, I was afraid of any book that had an animal on the cover. So I was very worried about the pig on the cover of Charlotte's Web. So that's just a side thing. Tracy Bailey read Charlotte's Web all the time. And I asked her, why, as an adult, why did she think, she knew how it was going to turn out. Why did she keep on rereading it? And she said, and I think about this all the time, it was just all so beautiful, and I didn't think that I could bear it. And then when I read it, I found that I could bear it. And that's what stories can do for us. It's that thing where they deliver the bad news and they reconcile us to it, even as they, so it helps. Stories help us to see the world, and they help us to bear the sorrow, because you're part of, it makes you a part of everything. So that's what I think about when Tiger wants Despero. I think it's that feeling of like it's also that, and I take this very seriously, that you have to tell the truth. But also, like Catherine Patterson says, you have to offer hope. So
well said. And when you won your second Newbery Medal for Flora and Ulysses, you spoke in your acceptance speech of how you turned your grief into laughter. Can you say more about that?
Well, Flora and Ulysses, which is the story of a squirrel who gets sucked up in a vacuum cleaner and turned into a superhero who writes poetry, is hopefully a very funny story. You laughed, didn't you, Jennifer?
A lot.
And it came about because my mother had died. And my mother and I are very different and also very similar. And we both have the same really annoying laugh. We both throw our heads back. A friend says we look like baby birds waiting to be fed when we laugh. And so it's just like we were both. And so as I was writing that book, I was grieving my mother. But she was so much on my mind, and it became this joyful thing because I could hear her laughing as I wrote it. So yeah, and that's another great gift of storytelling, is that it helps you grieve. And that's true for the person who's telling the story and also for the person who's reading.
And that's really been a through line in your work. I'm thinking of your most recent book, which is wonderful, by the way.
Thank you, Jennifer Brown.
It builds on the hilarity of the Mercy Watson picture books, or chapter books, I guess they are. But the Decawoo Drive books are for slightly older readers. And Stella Endicott in the Anything is Possible poem, she's reaching out to Horace.
Yeah.
Who's not a favorite person. But they reach out to each other for comfort.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny because they inadvertently get locked in a janitorial supply closet, and it's strange how much do you have the illustration?
I have it right here.
Because I went down and got the book too. Yeah, and it's odd how this book came out after everything started, but it's odd how relevant that is, because we're all kind of like, all we've got now is each other, right? And we're confined, and what we have to do is reach out and for each other's hands and take comfort from each other.
And I'm getting a little feedback. I hope it's okay.
I can still hear you.
You can still hear me. Some of my very favorite lines in any book come at the end of Louisiana's Way Home, which I'm not going to read now because we don't want to give anything away.
Mm.
But Louisiana has a granny that she's a bit conflicted about.
Yeah.
And she's able to hold both the love she has for Granny and the challenges she has with her together at the same time, and to be grateful that this woman takes care of her as best she can.
Yes.
Would you say that is a common thread in your work?
It is. And Jenny Brown, from knowing me for a long time, that I am unaware of the common threads in my book. And it's only through having done this for a while and for having really good reviewers and also children and teachers that I started to, I tell this story and I'll tell it very quickly, Jennifer Brown, about doing my very first school visit. And it was so exciting. I was going to get paid to do this and to go and talk about my book, right? And I don't know what I thought was going to happen, but I went trotting in there just all geared up and excited. And I stood up in front of these fifth graders and with the teacher. And she said, okay, class, here's the person who wrote Because of Winn-Dixie. And now what we're going to do is talk about the themes in this book. And it was a horrifying moment for me because I had no idea what the themes were. And I just, it was really, truly, it's like, oh man, they were going to pay me to talk about my book and everything. And now I've already messed it up because it's like, but the teacher and the kids worked together to put, and this is the first time I encountered my themes, Jennifer Brown, and forgiveness and family and friendship and those things that they listed and that I then went out to my car and wrote down so I'd be prepared for the next school visit and I could talk about the themes are the themes that seemingly have preoccupied me and if I'm lucky, will preoccupy me for the rest of my life. And I will keep on working them and turning them over in stories. So.
Well, thank you for that, Kate. I'm going to see if we got some questions in because I see that we have quite a few here. Someone wants to know if you're going to continue to add to this series. So I'm guessing.
To Jackaloo? Well, we've got one more coming out next year. And I have to say that Mercy Watson and Jackaloo is very much on my mind. So I would think that I'm not done. Let's just say that. Yeah, that's probably the best way to say it.
Someone here wants to be an author someday, and they want to know what your advice would be and what it's like.
I wonder if that someone is a child or an adult, but you know what? It doesn't make any difference, Jennifer Brown, because the advice is always the same. Because in any, like when we used to do this in the time before and we were in a room of whatever we are, 400 people, and half adults, half kids, and the adults also want to know. They think that they want to write a book. And so always the advice is the same. Read as much as you can. And you should be thrilled to get that assignment if you want to be a writer. So read as much as you can. Find some way to make a deal with yourself about how you're going to do the work. As Jennifer Brown said, for me, it's 2 pages a day. That might not be the thing that works for you, but it's a good, easy place to start because anybody has time to do 2 pages a day. So make some deal about how you're going to write and honor that deal that you've made with yourself. Read, and then back to the Curlin, you have to rewrite. It doesn't matter if you think that this is a thing that you were born to do. You're not going to be able to sit down and make it come out right the first time. It's impossible unless you're Mozart. And guess what? You're probably not Mozart. So you need to be willing to do the work of rewriting it. So read, write, rewrite. Keep a notebook with you. Pay attention to everything that you see. Eavesdrop on people. And then if you're a kid and you're thinking about what you want to do with your life and you say to your parents, I think I want to be a writer, and they say, why don't you go to law school? Be willing to stand up for yourself and say, no, I want to be a writer.
And Kate, can you talk about the time of day that you write?
Yeah, sure. It's I like to get up when it's still dark. And you kind of like the world is yours at that point. So I'm usually up around 5 or 5:30, depending on the time of year. I have a coffee maker that goes off automatically. I come down, I pour the cup of coffee, and I go in and I write the 2 pages. And part of the reason I do it early in the morning is because you still have 1 foot half in the dream world. I think that helps. And then the other thing is that critical part of your brain, the part that you really need when you're editing further down the line, and the part that you need for lots and lots of things. But it's also a part that says all kinds of objectionable things to you, like, you can't do this, you don't know what you're doing, this will never work out, you're not a writer. That part of my brain sleeps in. And so it's like at about 9 o'clock, it shows up. But if I get up early, I beat the critical part of myself out of bed, and it makes it easier to do the writing.
And Kate, the beautiful thing about what you just said is that you also talk about this in your prompts on Facebook. So for people who are watching this now, they can go to your Facebook page and follow along with the step-by-step tips that you give them.
What else have you got, Jenny Brown?
Let's see.
Are you looking on the feed thing? Ask the question. Okay. Yep. Okay.
My 6th grader wants to know how you come up with your ideas.
Well, it goes back to that writing advice, actually, which is, I remember a kid asking me, is it plagiarism if when you're reading a book, you get an idea for your own book? And it's like, absolutely not. Because when you're reading, you're in conversation with everybody that has come before. So ideas come from reading books that will spark something else entirely in me. But a lot of ideas come from carrying that notebook around and just paying attention to everything. And not just the moon and the stars and the people who and what they're saying to each other, but also what runs through my head. And so, because sometimes you never know when a story idea is going to show up. And part of honoring the job and yourself is to have a notebook so you can write those things down when they show up.
Kate, there is a son here who would like to know what inspired you to write the Mercy Watson books.
Well, Mercy Watson is it's a long story. I'll try to condense it. I got a brand new car. It was the first brand new car of my life. And I was so excited. And the very first day that I had it, I took a friend to the airport, and she got into the car eating a gigantic piece of toast. And it had a ton of butter on it. And so every time she took a bite out of it, she sprayed greasy crumbs everywhere. And I'm like, can you wait until you finish, just don't eat the toast in the car. And so what I got, and she kept on eating the toast, but she also talked about the virtues of toast and how it tasted better if somebody else had made it for you, and how it should have a great deal of butter on it, and it should be buttered all the way to the edges. And the thing was that it was just perfect timing, because I'd had this story about a pig who lived with Mr. and Mrs. Watson, who are not pigs. And it was like one of those stories that I kept on pulling out, working on, and putting it away. I couldn't make it come together. And yet something was missing. I didn't know what it was. And then here comes the toast. And I knew by the time I got rid of her at the airport what was missing in the book about the pig, which is what the pig loved above all other things, which is toast with a great deal of butter on it. So that's where it started. And those books have been so much fun to do, because you just put Mercy in a situation, and then you just stand back and watch her wreak havoc,
So Mercy is situationally funny, just as dramatically. I'm afraid we've come to the end of our time.
What? Already?
Right? Isn't it? Yes.
Oh, I have no idea. I'm having a good time. Okay. For an introvert, I had a great time. Yeah.
I'm so glad. I did too.
Good. I'm glad you made it on, Jenny Brown.
Me too, Kate DiCamillo. Thank you all for coming today. And please be sure to look at all of the wonderful events Rain Taxi has lined up for you at this book festival tomorrow, and also archived. So thank you so much for hosting us today.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.